Victoria Sterling thought she had it all figured out. Designer clothes, million-dollar jewelry, and engagement to tech billionaire Marcus Blackwood meant she was untouchable. But when she raised her hand against what she believed was just a maid's daughter in the marble halls of the Blackwood mansion, she had no idea she was about to lose everything. The girl she struck wasn't who she appeared to be, and the secret that emerged would cost Victoria not just her relationship, but $500 million. This is the story of how one moment of cruelty unraveled the biggest deception in corporate America. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The champagne bubbled in crystal flutes as Victoria Sterling adjusted her 15-carat engagement ring, catching the afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Blackwood estate. At 28, she had achieved what most women could only dream of: engagement to Marcus Blackwood, the 35-year-old tech mogul whose company, Blackwood Industries, had revolutionized cloud computing and made him the 7th richest man in America. Victoria smoothed her Valentino dress and checked her reflection in the ornate mirror hanging in the grand foyer. Everything had to be perfect for today's charity luncheon. 50 of San Francisco's most influential women would be arriving within the hour, and this event would cement her position as the future Mrs. Blackwood. She had worked tirelessly to reach this moment. Born to a middle-class family in Sacramento, Victoria had clawed her way up through Stanford's business program, then through the ranks of several tech startups, carefully cultivating relationships and building her network. When she met Marcus at a venture capital gala 2 years ago, she knew instantly that he was her ticket to the life she'd always envisioned. The engagement had been a media sensation. Forbes featured their story, calling it the union of tech and beauty. Victoria's Instagram following had exploded to 3 million overnight. Every fashion brand wanted to dress her, every event planner wanted to work with her, and every socialite wanted to be her friend. "Miss Sterling, the florists have finished at the dining room," came a voice from behind her. Victoria turned to see Elena Rodriguez, the head housekeeper who had managed the Blackwood estate for over 15 years. Elena was a quiet, efficient woman in her early 50s who seemed to anticipate every need before it was voiced. "Perfect. And the catering staff?" "They're setting up the appetizer station now. The champagne is properly chilled, and the photographer from Vanity Fair has arrived early to capture the setup." Victoria nodded approvingly. This luncheon wasn't just a charity event. It was her debut as the lady of the house, her opportunity to show San Francisco society that she belonged in their world. As Elena turned to leave, a young woman appeared in the doorway carrying a basket of freshly cut flowers from the estate's garden. She looked to be around 22, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and wearing a plain white shirt and jeans. Victoria had seen her around the estate before, usually helping with garden work or assisting the kitchen staff during large events. Many of the longtime employees had relatives who occasionally worked events for extra money. "Elena, I brought the roses you requested," the girl said, her voice soft but clear. Victoria frowned. The girl's presence bothered her for reasons she couldn't quite articulate. There was something about her that seemed different. Despite her simple clothes, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that Victoria found inappropriate for someone in her position. "Thank you, Isabella. Please arrange them in the crystal room before the guests arrive," Elena responded warmly. Isabella. Victoria had never bothered to learn her full name, assuming she was just another member of the household staff's extended family who helped out during busy periods. Many of the longtime employees had relatives who occasionally worked events for extra money. "Actually," Victoria interrupted, her voice sharp, "I don't think those roses are quite right for today. The color is too deep. I specifically requested pale pink roses, not these dark ones." Isabella looked down at the basket, then back up with a gentle expression. "These are the pale pink roses from the garden. The lighting in here might be making them appear darker." Victoria's jaw tightened. She wasn't accustomed to being corrected, especially not by someone she considered beneath her station. "I know what I ordered, and these are not it. I can't have my guests seeing subpar flowers at my luncheon." Victoria, Elena interjected diplomatically. The roses are beautiful. Isabella has an excellent eye for arrangements. Perhaps we could— No. Victoria's voice cut through the air like ice. I'm tired of the staff in this house thinking they can question my decisions. This is my event, my house, and my rules. Isabella remained calm, but Victoria noticed a flicker of something. Was it amusement? Cross her features. That tiny hint of defiance ignited something furious in her chest.
I'm sorry if there was confusion, Isabella said quietly. I'll gather different roses from the garden. You'll do more than that, Victoria snapped. You'll learn your place in this house. I don't know who you think you are, but you're nothing more than a maid's daughter playing dress-up. The words hung in the air like poison. Elena's face went pale, and she stepped forward protectively. Miss Sterling, please. But Victoria was beyond reasoning. Months of pressure, of proving herself worthy of Marcus's world, of constantly being judged by his business associates and social circle, had finally reached a breaking point. All of her insecurities and fears crystallized into rage, directed at this young woman who dared to challenge her authority. Don't you dare Miss Sterling me while defending her insolence. I've watched this girl float around here like she owns the place, and I'm sick of it. Isabella set down the flower basket slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. When she looked up, there was something new in her eyes, not defiance, but a cold clarity that made Victoria's skin prickle. I apologize if my presence has made you uncomfortable, Isabella said, her voice steady. That was never my intention. Something about the girl's composure only fueled Victoria's anger further. She was supposed to be cowering, apologizing profusely, knowing her place. Instead, she stood there with the poise of someone who had never doubted her worth. Your intention, Victoria's voice rose dangerously. Your intention should be to stay invisible and do your job without question, but instead you waltz around here like you belong, questioning my choices, making me look incompetent in front of the staff. Victoria, stop this immediately, Elena said, her voice urgent. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Victoria whirled around to face the housekeeper. You've let this girl get ideas above her station, and now she thinks she can challenge me. Well, I'm about to remind her exactly who she is and where she belongs. The sound of the slap echoed through the marble foyer like a gunshot. Isabella's head snapped to the side, her hand instinctively rising to her reddened cheek. For a moment, the entire house seemed to hold its breath. Even the distant sounds of caterers preparing in the kitchen had fallen silent. Victoria stood frozen, her hands still raised, suddenly realizing what she had done, but her pride wouldn't let her back down now. She had committed to this course of action, and retreat would only make her look weak. Let that be a lesson to you, she said, her voice shaking slightly. Know your place. Isabella slowly turned her head back to face Victoria. The mark on her cheek was already darkening, but her eyes remained steady and calm. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than before, but somehow more powerful. My place, she repeated softly. Yes, I suppose it's time everyone knew exactly what my place is. Elena had tears in her eyes as she stepped forward, but Isabella raised her hand gently to stop her. It's all right, Elena. Some truths can't stay hidden forever. Victoria felt a chill run down her spine. There was something in Isabella's tone, something in the way Elena was looking at her with what appeared to be pity that made her stomach clench with unease. What are you talking about? Victoria demanded, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. Isabella reached into her back pocket and pulled out her phone. With deliberate slowness, she dialed a number and raised it to her ear. Hello, Dad. I think it's time. Victoria's blood turned to ice water in her veins. Dad. Elena's face had gone completely white, and she was shaking her head almost imperceptibly, as if trying to stop something inevitable from happening. "Who are you calling?" Victoria whispered, though part of her already knew the answer would change everything. Isabella ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. When she looked up, there was no anger in her expression, only a profound sadness that seemed far too mature for someone her age. "Someone who loves me very much. Someone who's going to be extremely interested to learn how his future daughter-in-law treats people she considers beneath her." The world tilted on its axis as the implications hit Victoria like a physical blow. The girl's composure, her confidence, Elena's protective behavior, the way she'd said, "my house," earlier, it all suddenly made terrible, devastating sense.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "No," Victoria breathed. "That's impossible. You work here. You're nobody." Isabella's smile was sad but not unkind. "I'm Isabella Blackwood," she said quietly. "Marcus is my father." The silence that followed Isabella's revelation stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Victoria's mind raced through fragments of memory, desperately trying to reconcile what she thought she knew with this impossible truth. Marcus had never mentioned having a daughter. In 2 years of dating, through countless dinners with his business associates, family gatherings, and intimate conversations, he had never once spoken of Isabella. "You're lying," Victoria said, but her voice cracked with uncertainty. "Marcus would have told me. I know everything about his life." Isabella touched her cheek gently where the handprint was still visible. "Do you? Did he tell you about his first wife, Catherine? About how she died in a car accident when I was 7? Did he mention that I chose to live quietly, away from the media attention that follows him everywhere?" Each word hit Victoria like a physical blow. She had asked Marcus about his past relationships early in her courtship, and he had mentioned being married once, briefly, when he was very young. He'd said it ended badly and that he preferred not to discuss it. Victoria had assumed it was a painful divorce, not a tragedy. "Even if that's true," Victoria said, grasping for control, "why would you hide here, pretending to be staff? Why live like a servant in your own father's house?" "I don't pretend to be anything," Isabella replied calmly. "I help Elena because I choose to. I work in the gardens because I love them. I stay out of the public eye because I've seen what media attention does to people. I've watched it change my father, watched him become more guarded, more isolated." Victoria's legs felt unsteady. She gripped the back of a nearby chair for support as the full magnitude of her mistake began to dawn on her. She had slapped Marcus Blackwood's daughter. She had called her nothing, told her to know her place, humiliated her in front of the household staff. "Why didn't Elena tell me?" Victoria whispered. "Because I asked her not to," Isabella said. "I wanted to see who you really were, when you thought no one important was watching. I wanted to know what kind of stepmother you might be." The words landed like daggers in Victoria's chest. Stepmother. The casual way Isabella said it revealed how thoroughly Victoria had failed whatever test she hadn't known she was taking. I didn't know," Victoria said weakly. "If I had known, would you have treated me differently?" Isabella's question was quiet but piercing. "The way you treat people when you think they can't affect your social status says everything about your character. It's exactly what I needed to understand." Heavy stutfoots echoed from the main staircase. Victoria turned to see Marcus descending, his usually perfectly groomed appearance disheveled, as if he'd been running. His dark hair was toweled, his tie loosened, and there was something dangerous in his expression that Victoria had never seen before. Behind him came Dr. Harrison Pierce, Marcus's longtime friend and personal physician, carrying a medical bag. Victoria's confusion deepened. Why would Marcus call a doctor? "Isabella, sweetheart, are you hurt?" Marcus's voice was gentle as he approached his daughter,
but his eyes never left Victoria's face. "I'm fine, Dad," Isabella said softly, but she unconsciously touched her cheek again. Dr. Pierce stepped forward with professional efficiency. "Let me take a look at that mark, Isabella. We need to document the extent of the injury." "Document?" Victoria found her voice again. "What do you mean, document?" Marcus finally looked directly at her, and Victoria felt her knees nearly buckle under the weight of his gaze. There was no love there, no warmth, no trace of the man who had proposed to her 6 months ago on a beach in Maui. "I mean," Marcus said, his voice deadly quiet, "that my daughter has been assaulted in my own home by someone I trusted, someone I was foolish enough to believe I knew. Marcus, please, you have to understand." "I understand perfectly." His words cut through her plea like ice. "I understand that you struck my child because you thought she was beneath you. I understand that you've been living in my house, wearing my ring, planning our wedding, while harboring the kind of cruelty that would make you raise your hand to someone you perceived as powerless." Dr. Pierce was photographing Isabella's cheek with a professional camera, the flash illuminating the red handprint that had already begun to bruise. Each flash felt like a nail in Victoria's coffin. "The swelling is minimal, but there's clear evidence of impact trauma. The mark will likely darken over the next few hours. I'm recommending ice to reduce the inflammation."
Inflammation and monitoring for any signs of concussion, though the blow appears to have been limited to facial contact. Concussion? Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't hit her that hard. It was just a slap. I never meant—" "You never meant to get caught," Marcus interrupted. "Tell me, Victoria, how many other people have you treated this way when you thought no one would find out? How many servers, clerks, assistants have endured your wrath because you believed they couldn't touch your perfect life?" Victoria's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. She wanted to deny it, but memories flooded back. The countless times she'd snapped at restaurant staff, dismissed retail workers, spoken condescendingly to anyone she perceived as lower on the social hierarchy. She'd told herself it was just assertiveness, just knowing her worth in a world that would walk all over her if she showed weakness. "I need you to remove that ring," Marcus said suddenly. Victoria's hand flew protectively to her engagement ring. The massive diamond had become a symbol of everything she'd worked for, everything she'd achieved. "Marcus, please, we can work through this. I made a mistake, but—" "The ring, Victoria." His voice carried the same authority that had built a tech empire worth $40 billion. When Marcus Blackwood spoke in that tone, even senators and CEOs listened. With shaking hands, Victoria twisted the ring from her finger. It felt like she was removing a piece of her soul. Marcus held out his palm, and she dropped the diamond into it, the diamond catching the light one last time before he closed his fist around it. "Elena," Marcus said without taking his eyes off Victoria, "please call security. I want Miss Sterling's belongings packed and removed from the premises within the hour." "No, Marcus, please." Victoria's composure finally cracked completely. Tears streamed down her face as the reality of her situation hit her. "I love you. We were going to be married. We had plans." "We had contracts," Marcus corrected coldly. "Legal agreements that I'm now reviewing with great interest." The prenuptial agreement. In her excitement over the engagement, she hadn't read it carefully, had trusted her lawyer's assurance that it was standard. But Marcus's lawyers were the best money could buy. If there were clauses about conduct, about behavior that could void their agreements. "You see, Victoria, when you're worth what I'm worth, you learn to protect yourself. The prenup you signed contains very specific language about actions that could be considered detrimental to the Blackwood family reputation. Assault, particularly against a family member, falls clearly into that category." Victoria's knees gave out completely. She sank into the chair she'd been gripping, her designer dress pooling around her like the remnants of a dream. "The merger," she whispered. "My consulting firm. Your consulting firm exists because I provided the startup capital and connected you with clients. Those contracts all contain morality clauses. Your behavior today doesn't just end our personal relationship, Victoria. It ends our business relationship as well." The full scope of her destruction was becoming clear. Victoria's consulting firm, Sterling Strategic Solutions, had been built entirely on Marcus's connections and recommendations. Without his backing, without access to his network of tech executives and venture capitalists, her business would collapse within months. "The house in Napa," she said desperately. "The apartment in Manhattan, the—" "All in my name," Marcus finished. "All provided as gifts to my fiancée, a status you no longer hold." Isabella had been silent through this exchange, but now she stepped forward. "Dad, maybe we could—" "No, sweetheart," Marcus said gently, his voice completely different when addressing his daughter. "This isn't about forgiveness or second chances. This is about who people really are when they think no one's watching." Two security guards appeared in the doorway, their expressions professional but alert. Victoria recognized them. Men who had nodded respectfully to her just hours ago now looked at her with the cool indifference reserved for unwelcome intruders. "Miss Sterling," the senior guard said politely, "if you could please come with us, we'll escort you while you collect your personal items." Victoria looked around desperately, seeking any ally, any sympathetic face. Elena was comforting Isabella, Dr. Pierce was putting away his equipment, and Marcus stood like a statue carved from judgment itself. 2 years. We were together for 2 years. Doesn't that mean anything? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a sadness that was somehow worse than his anger.
"It means I wasted 2 years on someone who wasn't who I thought they were. It means my daughter had to endure being struck by someone I brought into our lives. It means I failed in the most important job I have, protecting my child." As the security guards gently but firmly guided Victoria toward the stairs, she caught sight of herself in the foyer mirror. The perfectly dressed socialite was gone, replaced by a woman with smeared makeup, disheveled hair, and eyes full of panic. Behind her, she could hear Marcus speaking softly to Isabella, his voice filled with the love and concern that had once been directed at Victoria herself. The Vanity Fair photographer was still somewhere in the house, probably wondering why the charity luncheon hostess had disappeared. In a few hours, 50 of San Francisco's most prominent women would arrive expecting elegance and inspiration, only to find empty rooms and whispered gossip about the spectacular fall of Victoria Sterling. 3 hours after being escorted from the Blackwood estate, Victoria sat in her downtown San Francisco office staring at her laptop screen with growing horror. The internet moved fast, but Marcus Blackwood's legal team moved faster. Her assistant, Jennifer, knocked hesitantly on the door. "Victoria, I hate to bother you, but we've received 17 calls in the past hour, all from clients." Victoria's stomach dropped. "What kind of calls?" "They're all asking about contract terminations. Apparently, they received official notices this morning about the morality clauses in their agreements with Sterling Strategic Solutions." Victoria's hands trembled as she opened her email. Her inbox was flooded with messages from law firms representing her biggest clients. TechFlow Dynamics, Quantum Ventures, Silver Lake Partners, every major account her company serviced had received legal notifications within hours of her departure from the Blackwood mansion. "How is this even possible?" Victoria muttered, clicking through the emails. Each one was meticulously crafted, referencing specific contract language that she had never bothered to examine closely. Her phone buzzed with a call from Robert Chen, her attorney who had handled the prenuptial agreement negotiations. She answered on the first ring. "Victoria, what the hell happened today? I've got Blackwood's legal team breathing down my neck, claiming you violated multiple clauses in your engagement contract. It's complicated, Robert. I need you to find loopholes, ways to fight this. They can't just destroy everything over one moment of... One moment of what, exactly? Because according to the documentation they've sent me, you physically assaulted Marcus's daughter in front of multiple witnesses, including his personal physician who has detailed medical records of the injury. Victoria closed her eyes. The carefully worded legal language of the contracts she had signed was coming back to haunt her. Marcus's lawyers hadn't just been thorough, they'd been prophetic, anticipating every possible scenario that could damage the Blackwood family reputation. "Can we settle?" she asked desperately. "Negotiate some kind of reduced penalty?" "Victoria, you need to understand what you're dealing with here. Marcus Blackwood doesn't just have lawyers. He has an entire legal ecosystem. These aren't just contracts. They're interconnected agreements that span everything from your business partnerships to your personal financial arrangements. When you triggered the morality clauses, you didn't just lose your engagement. You lost access to a network worth hundreds of millions of dollars." Victoria's second line was ringing. Jennifer appeared at the door again, looking increasingly worried. "It's Amanda Walsh from the Chronicle. She says it's urgent." Amanda Walsh was San Francisco's most connected gossip columnist, known for breaking stories that could make or destroy reputations overnight. Victoria's blood ran cold. "Tell her I'm not available." But even as the words left her mouth, her laptop chimed with a news alert. "Tech Harris assaulted by Billionaire's Fiancée," read the headline from the San Francisco Chronicle's website. Below it was a photo that made Victoria's heart stop. Isabella Blackwood, photographed at a charity gala 2 years ago, identified as the reclusive daughter of tech mogul Marcus Blackwood. The article was devastating in its precision. It didn't just report the assault, it provided context that Victoria had never known. Isabella Blackwood wasn't just Marcus's daughter. She was a Stanford graduate with degrees in environmental science and sustainable technology. She had quietly donated millions to environmental causes, funded scholarship programs for underprivileged students, and worked with several nonprofits focused on climate change research. The article painted Isabella as a reluctant heiress who had deliberately chosen to live outside the spotlight, working anonymously to make the world better. In contrast, Victoria was portrayed as a social climber who had violently lashed out at someone she perceived as beneath her station.
"No," Victoria whispered, scrolling through the comments section. Social media was erupting with outrage. #JusticeForIsabella was already trending on Twitter, with thousands of users sharing stories of their own encounters with entitled behavior from wealthy individuals. Her phone rang again. This time, it was Marcus himself. "Victoria?" His voice was businesslike, devoid of any personal warmth. "I'm calling as a courtesy to inform you that Isabella has decided to press charges." "Charges?" Victoria's voice cracked. "Marcus, please, can't we handle this privately? I'll pay for counseling, donate to charity, whatever she wants." "She wants justice," Marcus said simply. "And frankly, so do I. You see, Victoria, what you did today wasn't just assault. It was a hate crime." "A hate crime? That's ridiculous. I didn't attack her because of her race or religion." "You attacked her because you perceived her as being from a lower socioeconomic class. In California, assault motivated by perceived economic status can be prosecuted as a hate crime under specific circumstances. My daughter is prepared to testify that you explicitly referenced her supposed position as nothing more than a maid's daughter before you struck her." Victoria felt the walls of her world collapsing. She had said exactly that, word for word, in front of Alina and the other staff members. There would be witnesses, people who had heard her vicious words before the physical attack. "But I didn't know who she was," Victoria protested weakly. "That's exactly the point. You felt entitled to assault someone because you thought they were powerless. That's not a defense, Victoria. That's evidence of a deeply disturbed worldview." After Marcus hung up, Victoria sat in stunned silence. Her office, which had once felt like a symbol of her success, now felt like a mausoleum for her ambitions. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the San Francisco skyline, the same view that had once filled her with pride and determination. Jennifer appeared again, this time with a stack of papers. "Victoria, I'm sorry, but I have to give you my resignation. My husband works for TechFlow Dynamics, and they've made it clear that employees can't be associated with anyone involved in this scandal." Victoria stared at the resignation letter, the final piece of her professional life crumbling away. Jennifer had been with her for 3 years, had helped build Sterling Strategic Solutions from the ground up. "I understand," she said quietly. "I'll process your final paycheck immediately." After Jennifer left, Victoria opened her laptop again. The news story had been picked up by national outlets, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all running variations of the same headline. "Billionaire's fiancée faces criminal charges after assaulting tech heiress." The financial implications were becoming clear as well. Her business bank accounts were already showing holds. Marcus's legal team had moved quickly to freeze assets that were connected to their joint ventures. Her credit cards had been deactivated. The office lease, which was guaranteed by Blackwood Industries, would be terminated within 30 days. Victoria opened a new browser window and searched for Isabella Blackwood environmental work. The results painted a picture of a young woman who had used her privilege responsibly, quietly funding clean energy research and supporting sustainable agricultural initiatives around the world. One article from an environmental journal described her as the anonymous angel who had funded breakthrough research in carbon capture technology. The contrast was stark and damning. While Victoria had been posting Instagram photos of expensive dinners and luxury vacations, Isabella had been working to solve climate change. While Victoria had been climbing social ladders, Isabella had been building ladders for others to climb. Victoria's personal phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Honey, I just saw the news. Are you okay? Should I come to San Francisco?" How could she explain to her parents that she had destroyed everything they had sacrificed to help her achieve? They had worked double shifts at the Sacramento Postal Service to pay for her Stanford tuition, had celebrated every promotion, every success, every step up the ladder that had ultimately led to this catastrophic fall. Another text, this one from her sister. "Vic, please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me you didn't really hit someone." Victoria stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "It's complicated." But it wasn't complicated at all. She had revealed her true character in a moment when she thought no one important was watching. She had shown the world who she really was beneath the designer clothes and polished facade. The office phone rang one final time. Victoria almost didn't answer, but something compelled her to pick up. In the holding cell, she found herself sharing space with 3 other women. A young mother arrested for shoplifting baby formula, an elderly woman picked up for trespassing while sleeping in a park, and a teenager charged with drug possession. They all stared at Victoria with a mixture of curiosity and hostility. "You're that rich lady who beat up the billionaire's daughter," the teenager said, recognition dawning in her eyes. "My mom works cleaning houses in Pacific Heights. She says people like you treat us like we're invisible unless you want to yell at us about something." Victoria pressed herself against the cell wall, suddenly understanding what it felt like to be powerless and vulnerable. For the first time in her adult life, she couldn't buy her way out of a situation, couldn't leverage connections or social status to escape consequences. Hours passed before Robert returned with news. "I've spoken with the DA's office. The plea offer is still on the table, but there's been a development that complicates things." Victoria looked up hopefully. Maybe Marcus had decided to show mercy. Maybe Isabella had changed her mind about pressing charges. "The FBI is investigating your business practices," Robert said grimly. "Apparently, some of the contracts you brokered through Marcus's connections involved federal contractors. There are allegations of bid rigging and contract manipulation that could result in federal charges."
Victoria felt the last vestiges of hope drain from her body. Federal charges? Wire fraud, conspiracy, possibly racketeering if they can prove a pattern of criminal enterprise. We're talking about decades in federal prison if they decide to prosecute. The holding cells suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in from all sides. Victoria had always believed that her intelligence and ambition would protect her from real consequences. She had built her entire identity around being untouchable, too smart and too connected to fail. There's more, Robert continued reluctantly. The IRS is auditing your personal and business tax returns for the past 5 years. Apparently, some of the gifts Marcus gave you were improperly reported, and several of your business deductions are being questioned. Victoria began to laugh, a sound so bitter and broken that the other women in the cell moved away from her. Tax evasion, federal fraud charges, assault with a hate crime enhancement? The American dream had become an American nightmare in less than 24 hours. What about the $500 million? Victoria asked suddenly. The number in all the headlines. Robert consulted his notes. That appears to be the estimated value of business opportunities and financial arrangements you've lost access to as a result of your actions. Your consulting firm was on track to earn approximately $50 million in fees over the next decade from contracts facilitated by Marcus's network. The Blackwood family's legal team has calculated the total economic impact of severing those relationships. It was a staggering sum that Victoria had never truly comprehended. She had been living inside an economic ecosystem worth $500 million, sustained entirely by her relationship with Marcus. When that relationship ended, the entire structure collapsed. A guard approached the cell. "Sterling, you've got a visitor." Victoria expected to see Robert again, or perhaps her parents who were driving up from Sacramento. Instead, she found herself face to face with Elena Rodriguez, the Blackwood family's housekeeper. Elena sat across from Victoria in the small visitation room, her expression a mixture of sadness and disappointment that was somehow worse than anger would have been. "I came because Elena asked me to," Elena said quietly. "She wanted you to know that she takes no pleasure in what's happening to you." Victoria stared at the table between them. "Why would she send you here?" "Because she's a good person who believes in redemption even for people who have shown themselves to be cruel." Elena paused, studying Victoria's face. "She also wanted you to understand something that might help you in the days ahead." "What?" Isabella chose to work alongside the household staff not because she had to, but because she wanted to understand what it means to serve others. She spent years learning from people like me, people you dismissed as beneath your notice. She learned about dignity, about finding meaning in honest work, about treating everyone with respect regardless of their position. Elena leaned forward slightly. "Do you know what she said after you struck her?" Victoria shook her head. "She said she felt sorry for you. She said you must be very frightened and very lonely to lash out like that at someone you thought couldn't defend themselves." The words hit Victoria harder than any legal consequence could. To be pitied by the person she had assaulted, to be seen as pitiable by someone she had tried to humiliate, it was a judgment more devastating than any court could deliver. "The girl you struck yesterday," Elena continued, "has been working on legislation to protect domestic workers from exactly the kind of treatment you've been giving to service employees for years. She's been funding legal clinics that help people fight back against workplace abuse and discrimination." Victoria felt a sob building in her chest. "I didn't know." "That's the point," Elena said gently. "You never bothered to know. You never saw any of us as real people with real lives and real dignity." As Elena prepared to leave, she turned back one final time. Isabella wanted me to tell you that if you're willing to do the real work of changing who you are, if you're willing to truly make amends for the harm you've caused, then maybe something good can still come from this terrible situation. Victoria was led back to her cell, Elena's words echoing in her mind. For the first time since the nightmare began, she wasn't thinking about what she had lost or how to minimize her punishment. She was thinking about the person she had become and wondering if it was possible to become someone different. 18 months later, Victoria Sterling walked out of the Santa Clara County Jail into a world that had moved on without her. The California sun felt harsh against her pale skin, and the simple blue jeans and white t-shirt she wore were a stark contrast to the designer wardrobe that had once defined her identity. Her sister Rachel was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against a modest Honda Civic that was a far cry from Victoria's former luxury cars. The embrace they shared was tentative, marked by months of difficult conversations through prison glass and the weight of a family's disappointment. "How are you holding up?" Rachel asked as they drove through San Jose towards Sacramento. Victoria stared out the window at strip malls and fast food restaurants, the unglamorous landscape of ordinary American life. "Different," she said simply. The plea deal had ultimately saved her from federal charges, but the 18 months in county jail had been transformative in ways she never could have anticipated. Stripped of her wealth, her connections, and her carefully constructed image, Victoria had been forced to confront the person she had become. Her cellmate for most of that time had been Carmen Gutierrez, a woman serving time for check fraud, who had worked as a housekeeper for wealthy families in Silicon Valley for 15 years. Carmen had no reason to show kindness to someone who had built a career on looking down at people like her, but she had done so anyway. "You know what your problem was?" Carmen had said during one of their late-night conversations. "You thought being successful meant being better than other people. Real success is lifting others up while you climb." Victoria had spent her sentence working in the jail's kitchen, serving meals to fellow inmates and learning what it meant to perform manual labor without complaint. She had attended mandatory anger management classes, participated in victim impact sessions, and slowly begun to understand the ripple effects of her behavior. The community service requirement had placed her with the Domestic Workers Alliance, where she spent weekends cleaning houses, washing dishes in restaurant kitchens, and experiencing firsthand the physical demands and emotional challenges of service work. The irony wasn't lost on her. The woman who had once looked down on the help was now literally part of that workforce. "There's something you should know," Rachel said as they merged onto Highway 80. "Mom and Dad have been following your case in the news. They're proud of the work you've been doing." Victoria's throat tightened. Her parents had visited twice during her incarceration, their faces showing a mixture of love and bewilderment at how the ambitious daughter had fallen so far. But they had also seen the letters she'd written to her victims, the volunteer work she'd committed to, and the genuine remorse that had replaced her former arrogance. "Have you heard anything about—" Victoria couldn't bring herself to say Marcus's name. "About the Blackwoods?" Rachel glanced at her sister. "Isabella's been in the news a lot. Good news. She testified before Congress about climate legislation last month, and she's engaged." Victoria felt a strange mixture of emotions. Not jealousy, but something closer to relief. Isabella had moved forward with her life, had found happiness despite the trauma Victoria had inflicted. It was what she deserved. "There's something else," Rachel continued carefully. "She's been funding legal aid clinics that help domestic workers fight workplace abuse. She mentioned you in an interview." Victoria's head turned sharply. "What did she say?"
that sometimes people need to lose everything to find out who they really are. That she hopes your experience leads to genuine change, not just for you, but for others who might learn from your story. They drove in silence for several miles before Rachel pulled into a rest stop. "Victoria, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Victoria nodded, steeling herself for whatever was coming. "Are you really different, or are you just sorry you got caught?" It was the question Victoria had been asking herself for 18 months. The easy answer was that prison had changed her, that losing everything had taught her humility and compassion, but the truth was more complicated.
"I'm different because I understand now what I was really doing," Victoria said slowly. "I wasn't just being rude to service workers. I was dehumanizing people because it made me feel powerful. I was so afraid of being looked down on that I spent my whole adult life looking down on others." Rachel studied her sister's face, searching for signs of the old Victoria beneath the surface. "The night before my sentencing," Victoria continued, "I wrote letters to every person I could remember treating badly. Restaurant servers, hotel clerks, retail workers, even people whose names I never bothered to learn. Most of the letters came back undelivered, but 7 people wrote back." Victoria pulled a worn envelope from her pocket, containing responses that had sustained her through the darkest moments of her incarceration. "This one is from Maria Santos, not the detective, a different Maria who worked at a restaurant in Palo Alto. I screamed at her once because my table wasn't ready when I wanted it to be. She wrote back saying she forgave me, and that she hoped I would use my experience to help other people understand that everyone deserves basic respect." Rachel read the letter, noting the careful handwriting and generous spirit of a woman who had every right to harbor resentment. "I'm different because I spent 18 months learning what it feels like to be powerless, to have guards decide when I could eat, when I could sleep, when I could speak, to have every aspect of my life controlled by people who saw me as just another number in the system." They resumed their drive towards Sacramento, passing through the Central Valley where Victoria's parents still lived in the same modest house where she'd grown up. The contrast between her childhood home and the Blackwood estate would have once embarrassed her. Now it represented something precious, a family that loved her despite her failures. "What are you going to do now?" Rachel asked as they neared their destination. Victoria had been dreading and anticipating this question for months. Her business was gone, her professional reputation destroyed, her savings depleted by legal fees and restitution payments. At 30 years old, she was starting over, with nothing but a criminal record and a newfound understanding of her own capacity for cruelty. "I'm going to work for the Domestic Workers Alliance full-time. They offered me a position helping other women who've been released from prison find employment in service industries. The pay is terrible, and I'll be working with people who have every reason to hate someone like me." Rachel pulled into their parents' driveway, where she could see her mother peeking through the kitchen curtains. "But it's honest work," Victoria continued, "and maybe, if I spend the rest of my life trying to undo some of the damage I've done, I can become the person Isabella saw potential for me to be." As they sat in the car for a moment before going inside, Victoria reflected on the cosmic justice of her situation. She had lost $500 million in opportunities, but she had gained something infinitely more valuable: the ability to see other people as fully human. The woman who had once slapped a billionaire's daughter for speaking back to her was gone. In her place was someone who understood that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars or social status, but in the capacity to treat every person with dignity and respect. Victoria Sterling had paid the ultimate price for her cruelty, not just in legal consequences or financial ruin, but in the complete destruction of the person she thought she wanted to be. But from the ashes of that destruction, a better person had emerged. One who understood that in a world where power could corrupt so easily, the greatest strength lay in choosing kindness over dominance, service over selfishness. As she walked toward her childhood home, Victoria carried with her the weight of her past mistakes and the possibility of redemption.
She had learned the hardest lesson of all, that who we are when we think no one important is watching reveals our true character. And sometimes, losing everything is the only way to discover what really matters. The door opened before she could knock, and her mother's arms enveloped her in unconditional love. For the first time in years, Victoria Sterling was exactly where she belonged, not on top of the world, but grounded in the reality of human connection and the opportunity to spend her life making amends for the person she used to be. Behind her, in San Francisco, Isabella Blackwood was testifying before another congressional committee about climate change legislation, using her privilege and platform to fight for a better world. She had taken the worst moment of her life and transformed it into fuel for positive change. And somewhere in between those two stories, one of fall and redemption, the other of grace and perseverance, lay a truth about human nature that transcended wealth, status, and power. We are all capable of great cruelty and great kindness. The choice of which path to follow often comes down to a single moment, a single decision, a single slap that reveals who we really are underneath it all. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.